FBI. I was an FBI agent from December 10, 1951 until I retired March the 30th, 1979. At the time of my retirement, I was in charge of most of Southern California. I had over 700 personnel under my command, budget of $22.5 million. I had 16 offices that I was responsible for. I had a fantastic career. In the old days, the FBI was a great organization. Unfortunately, as I said a few moments ago, it's been infiltrated by the satanic cult, Illuminati movement, as well as other agencies like the NSA and the CIA and so forth. And I'll go more into detail on that in a minute. In my FBI career, I point this out to you because I'm establishing credibility. I do have credibility. I was one of the top executives in the FBI in my day. As a matter of fact, I was interviewed for the directorship in 1975 by Attorney General Griffin Bell's people. Of course, they didn't want me. It's very obvious because I'm rather outspoken. But, you know, I was watching TV here not too long ago. It was a couple of years ago, actually. And Brian Gumbel had Jim Nichols, who was Terry Nichols' brother, Terry Nichols being the Oklahoma City conspirator who was convicted and tried and so forth along with McVeigh. And I had given Jim my Oklahoma City report. I made 2 trips to Oklahoma City. Out of my pocket, I submitted a 222-page report. I've given it to congressmen, senators. Rohrabacher is the most recent one who did an investigation on Oklahoma City bombing here last December. And Jim says to Brian Gumbel, "Have you seen Ted Gunderson's report?" And Brian Gumbel says, "Oh, he's a conspiracy theorist." That's the way he cast me aside. You know, he's wrong. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy realist. There is a conspiracy. And I will prove it to you, and I'll document it. Time is very limited. I'll do the best I can in the next hour or so. But you can go back to Pearl Harbor. Actually, you can go back further than that. Go back to Pearl Harbor. We knew about Pearl Harbor December the 4th. We were attacked December the 7th. We could have pulled our fleet out of Pearl Harbor. We didn't. I've talked to the naval intelligence officer who intercepted or received that message that the Japanese code had been broken. He passed it up to his superiors. Nothing occurred. After the war, he was subpoenaed by Congress. His superior in the Navy said, "Don't worry about it. Don't go to the hearing." He didn't. Never heard anything more about it. Jack Kennedy assassination. It's well documented. He was murdered by the mob in Chicago, Sam Giancana's group, and also by the CIA. Jack was going to revamp the CIA. He made his personal goals and aims public, within his circles, of course, and he was going to make some major changes. Also, he had withheld and aborted the invasion of Cuba, which upset some individuals. I recently learned that a fellow named I.B. Hale, who was an All-American football player at Texas Christian, was ordered and was involved, he was an FBI agent at the time, in changing the parade route of the Jack Kennedy group that day. I have information that the night before the Kennedy assassination, there was a secret meeting at the Clinton Murchison home, Murchison being an oil man. Those in that meeting included Lyndon Baines Johnson, and I'm sorry to say, and I regret that I know this is true because I've personally documented, I've talked to people who know that this is true. J. Edgar Hoover was there. I was shocked when I learned this, and I only learned this within the last year. And the reason I know is because I talked to the maid that worked in the Murchison home that night. And when Lyndon Johnson came out of that meeting, he says to his girlfriend, Margaret Brown, who wrote a book about this, and I used to have my radio talk show in 97, 98, and I had her on my radio talk show. She said that Johnson told her, "After tomorrow, we don't have to worry about that SOB Kennedy." Bobby Kennedy, shot in the kitchen, the Ambassador Hotel, Los Angeles. 5 bullet shots in him. There were 11 shots fired. There were shot supposedly by Saran, and I'm sure he was. Saran was part of it. But Saran's gun would only hold 8 bullets. There were extra bullets in the wall and in the hall and in the door, covered up. Ruby Ridge, we all know about Randy Weaver. BATF tried to set him up. He wouldn't go along with it. They issued a bench warrant for his arrest. He didn't appear in court. They sent an army out to him. Horiochi, the FBI sharpshooter, murdered his wife in front of the window of the front door. Oklahoma City, I personally, as I said, made 2 trips to Oklahoma City. I was told by an inside investigator now, somebody that was on the inside, that there were at least 11 other people involved in Oklahoma City. The fertilizer bomb was a myth. There was no fertilizer bomb. Ridiculous. There was an ammonia nitrate, it was an electrohydrodynamic gaseous fuel device, a highly classified bomb that was tested in the early 1980s, 1982 as a matter of fact, in Area 51. The explosion was underestimated. It was so powerful it killed one of the technicians. I happen to have personal knowledge of that particular bomb. I'll call it the barometric bomb. The government covered it up. I have in my archives at home, by the way, I have over 300 boxes of research. I have my videotapes of the news broadcast the afternoon of Oklahoma City. The broadcasters on the TV stations in Oklahoma City, every one of them said they're bringing unexploded devices out of the building. One of them said, now we're going to find out who's behind this, because one of the unexploded devices has U.S. Army stenciled on it. That's right. And, of course, you and I know that McVeigh and Nichols could not possibly have been in there that morning and planted those devices. What I think was planned was the barometric bomb was to go off, a very highly explosive bomb. It's manufactured by the Hercules Manufacturing Company in Silicon Valley, developed by Michael Riconosciuto, a friend of mine who's now in prison because he dared to testify against Congress, the Brooks Committee. And they set him up on a drug operation, first offense, 30 years. Michael was an intelligence agent for some 20 years, one of my closest friends. I go visit him regularly at Terminal Island in San Pedro, California. That bomb was developed by Michael and his father, Hercules Manufacturing in Silicon Valley. It was a directional bomb, and if you look at the pictures of Oklahoma City, you'll see where half the building was taken away. It was like a half moon. Well, the 4 unexploded devices that were taken out of there, by the way, it's documented in a magazine article called Firehouse Magazine, September 1995. The editor of that magazine wrote the article based on information furnished to him by the Oklahoma City Fire Department. And in there he says, and he has a time schedule, that on certain times these unexploded devices were taken out of the building. There was a plan, in my opinion, to explode the barometric bomb, followed up by a series of bombs, and to bring that whole building down like they did 9/11. There was no question about it. They had planned, they, meaning the New World Order boys, and I'm going to go more into that in just a minute, to bring that whole Oklahoma City building down. We had Waco. It's kind of interesting because we know of posse comitatus. It's against the law for the federal government to use military against civilian personnel, violation of the law, yet they brought military personnel in. And it's kind of interesting because I know those of you who have looked at the the Waco case realize that there were 4 BATF agents who were killed in Waco. All 4 of those agents, in my research, took headshots. How many military men do we have out there? Raise your hand. What does that indicate to you? Sniper, right? They were shot by snipers. 4 headshots to 4 BATF agents. One of the headshots went from above down in through his lips and down into his body. From above. There was a helicopter there by the government. Further research established that those 4 BATF agents at one time were bodyguards for Bill Clinton. Larry, Oklahoma City again. I'm going to go back to Oklahoma City. Terry Nichols, most recently, again, the co-conspirator in the Oklahoma City case, recently submitted, in fact, January 19th, submitted a document, an affidavit in the courts in Salt Lake City that Larry Watts, number 2 man in the FBI, actually orchestrated Oklahoma City. You don't see this in the mainstream media, do you? The 1993 World Trade Center bombing of the February 26, 1993. There's an article in New York Times. I have a copy of this article. It's October 23, 1993, New York Times. And it states that the FBI had an informant in among the terrorists, Salam, and he was commissioned by the terrorists to put the bomb together. He went to his FBI handler, supervisor, told him he was the one to put the bomb together. He'd been commissioned by the terrorists. We're going to use a dummy bomb, aren't we? His FBI handler said, no, we're going to use a real bomb. The FBI not only knew in advance that they were going to bomb the World Trade Center, car bomb the World Trade Center, the FBI furnished the ingredients for the bomb. It was in the New York Times, LA Times. Now, what I don't understand is, do not the senators and the congressmen of the United States read those 2 newspapers? Right? Somebody should have looked into that and conducted an honest investigation. But then, after all, we have 911. Do you think there was an honest investigation there? Absolutely not. 911. My friend Mike Riconosciuto, intelligence agent for 2 decades. In the spring of 1986, I was contacted by a former top Reagan administrator, Bill Sloan, who's now dead, so I'll use his name. Bill said, can you help the Afghan rebels in their fight against the Soviets? Knowing Mike and knowing his background, I contacted Mike. I said, let's see if we can help the fellows out over there, beat the communists. So we had a meeting with the fellow from the State Department/CIA in Los Angeles. Mike and I did. He brought along a 4th individual. 4th individual was Tim Osman. And he didn't say much. He was tall, slender, clean-shaven. And Mike and this fellow from Washington, D.C. talked. I sat in the background. And long story short, Michael was able to put together a package and provided the Afghan rebels the surface-to-air missiles that defeated the Soviets in Afghanistan. Also, Mike learned in his contacts, working with the Arabs, that our government gave the Afghan rebels $650 million a year for 5 years. No question about it in my mind. They're using that money today against us. Okay. They defeated the communists over there, and as a result of Mike's contact with these individuals, he developed sources in the Middle East, Arab friends. He had, even though he's in prison because he testified against the Department of Justice on the Promise Software case, and I don't have time to go into details there, but the Promise Software is a deal about Bill and Nancy Hamilton out of Washington, D.C., and this software, this computer, keeps track of everything you can imagine. The Department of Justice took it, leased it for 2 years at the tune of $10 million, and then at the end of 2 years refused to pay the Hamiltons. The Brooks Committee had a hearing on it, and Mike was called to testify because he put a trap door in the computer. And then when the Department of Justice refused to pay the Hamiltons, a fellow named Earl Bryant, past president of United Press International, took that computer and sold it around the world to countries all over the world with that trap door in it. Of course, these countries didn't know that there was a trap door there, but the Brooks Committee was looking into this. This is in the late 1980s. 3 weeks before Mike was to testify, he received a telephone call, he claims, from a fellow named Peter Vietnix, Department of Justice. If you testify, you'll be sorry. He testified. Shortly thereafter, he was arrested for drugs, claimed he had a methamphetamine laboratory, 30 years, as I mentioned. Anyway, in spite of the fact that he's in prison, he still had these contacts in the Arab world. And when he was in Coleman, Florida, the federal penitentiary, he had access to the computer. and a very, very brilliant fellow, high IQ, and a very cagey individual, very competent, very capable. Mike developed these sources inside the Arab world. Now, he's in prison in Terminal Island now, but at the time, he was at White Deer, Pennsylvania, Federal Correction Institute. He tried to get to the FBI, tried to get to the Department of Justice, tried to get the word to the proper authorities because Mike developed information, advanced information about 911. As a matter of fact, on February the 5th, 2001, Mike wrote a letter to his attorney, Don Bailey, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I have developed sources inside the Arab world. They're about to attack us. I have detailed information. I have a copy of that letter, and it's certified, February 6, 2001. Nobody would talk to Mike. Finally, his attorney, Lou Buffardi in Chicago, wrote to the attorney, Colin Powell, and said, I have a client who has information about terrorist activities. And they sent in a fellow named Keith Kutry from the FBI in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And at that time, Mike told him who was head of the terrorist movement in the United States, an electrical engineer out of Patterson, New Jersey, who has since gone back to the Middle East. Gave him details about forthcoming attacks in the United States by the Arabs, terrorist attacks, and so forth. Gave him an informant, gave the FBI an informant, who was preparing false IDs for 4,500 terrorists around the world. The FBI did not interview him. 911 occurred, much to Mike's surprise. He thought he had done his part as an American citizen. And then they interviewed this individual 2 days. They came back and interviewed Michael 2 days afterwards, and later interviewed this individual who was preparing these false passports, IDs, and threatened him with prosecution, deported him, and sent him back. We had another individual, General Omby, out of Fort Sill, Oklahoma, back in 1982. I'm just giving you some examples of the conspiracy. There is a conspiracy, folks. There's no question about it. These are just some examples. I'm going to go more into detail. General Omby was responsible for the biggest drug bust in the history of the Army at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He went to work one night late. He was working. His wife didn't come. He didn't come home. They found him the next day out in the hallway, hung. He had his uniform, his jacket, neatly placed next to him. There was no suicide note. His hands were tied behind him, and the Army said he committed suicide. Now the question is, did he tie his hands behind him before or after he hung himself? Okay. We had Ron Brown, Secretary of Commerce. He came in, he went on a flight. He was involved in a serious financial investigation. Larry, I think, had detailed knowledge of this. And he was ordered to take a trip around the world, goodwill trip of some sort. The plane came in on a beam into the mountain. There was a survivor, Kitty Kelly, a flight attendant. She broke her neck. She survived the crash, but she was found later with a broken neck. The man in the tower committed suicide right afterwards. Two pathologists said he had a bullet hole in his head the size of they thought of a .45 caliber. These are just a few of the. And Gary Webb, you remember Gary Webb? He was the one who was responsible for exposing the CIA drug operation into South Central LA. He was ruled a suicide. He shot himself in the head twice. Okay. So when did I wake up? Well, I left the FBI in March 30, 79. Attorney General Griffin Bell hired me to coordinate security for the Pan American Games. Came back. I was involved in the '84 Olympics in Los Angeles. I was a consultant. And as a private investigator, I opened my own firm in Westwood, California. Worked the Jeffrey R. McDonald case, M.A.C.D.O.N.A.L.D. He's a former Green Beret doctor convicted of murdering his wife, 2 children, Fort Bragg, February 17, 1970. He'd been tried, convicted, sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. Defense team came to me, will you investigate it? This is after the fact, of course. He's already serving time. I said yes. Long story short, within 10 months, I obtained a signed confession from Helena Stokely, who said he didn't do it. It was my satanic cult group that committed the murders, wife and 2 children, 2.5 and 5.5. We submitted that to the courts. We were ignored, of course. So I found out, Helena told me that this was a large-scale drug operation that was being covered up. They were flying drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of the dead GIs coming out of Southeast Asia. There were military generals, plural, involved, other military personnel, officers, police officers, investigators for the Army, and so forth. That was my wake-up call. And I went public with the information, and I was like a magnet, like a sponge. People came from all walks of life throughout the United States telling me about the satanic cult movement in this country. People from the West and the East and the South, and I'm still receiving these phone calls. One day I had 900 emails, so if you send me an email and I don't answer, you'll understand why, okay? There are tremendous demands on me because there are so many victims out there. These people are victims of a covert, illegal, rogue U.S. government criminal enterprise. Okay. You have to understand, 27 plus years in the FBI, me. I was very proud of this in my day, okay? However, it was only until I got out that I realized there was this undercurrent, rogue, illegal criminal enterprise operating in this country. There's 2 elements in the government, overt, covert. I was an overt operator. I was the guy that went to the bank robbery. I did everything, okay, in my day. Bank robberies, kidnappings, extortions. I negotiated with 2 terrorists, Philadelphia International Airport, July 12, 1972, for the successful release of 113 passengers on an airplane. I picked up a 10 most wanted. I ran the whole gamut. Worked counter-espionage in New York City. And I was very active against the Black Panthers in New Haven. I was number 2 man there in charge of anti-terrorism, espionage, and so forth back in the late 60s, Vietnam days, and so forth. And I recently had an opportunity to prepare a report for the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee. I was asked to prepare this. And I wrote it in 12 days, as a matter of fact. It's being typed as we speak. And I'm going to read my introduction to you, which I think tells the whole story about what's going on. Here's what I said in the introduction of this report. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know if anybody's going to do anything about it. Hopefully they will. Based on 28 years' experience and research, I have determined there are thousands of victims who have been targeted by an illegal U.S. government rogue criminal enterprise that is active 24 hours a day throughout the United States. A network of victims who work with me have reached the same conclusion based on 1, their personal experience. These are the people who have come to me. 2, the significant number of victims, thousands of them. And 3, the extent and intensity of the harassment. I'm talking about micro beams, I'm talking about surveillances, I'm talking about poison gas, everything, the evil that you can think of. It is far too active to be operated and controlled by private enterprise. Private enterprise goals are to achieve financial gain. These operations require extensive financing to operate with no return on the investment. I believe that these programs are financed through illegal black operations, i.e. drugs, prostitution, gambling, kidnapped children who are auctioned off as sex slaves, used as human sacrifices and body parts. I have documentation of every one of those. Absolute proof in my reports. By the way, this is a report. Speaking of my reports, this is a book that I put together that lists, and it's also on my website, tedgunderson.com, lists my research. What I'm telling you today is written up in reports and documented. I believe this well-organized, sophisticated operation has a central command located somewhere in the United States with multiple satellite offices scattered throughout the country. This criminal enterprise by this rogue element targets an individual. It is necessary in order to target them, they one, identify the individual, two, outline the reason the victim is targeted, and three, document and identify the weapons and tactics being directed against him or her. So I will do that in this lecture that I'm giving right here today. When I first started out, after the McDonald case, I received some phone calls. The FBI was here talking to me about you. I filed a Freedom of Information request. I learned that I had 3 investigations of me by the FBI. Here I am. I was one of the top executives. I was interviewed for the director's job in 1975, and I'm being investigated. I was shocked. And I obtained a couple of copies of the reports. I submitted a Freedom of Information Act. I got some pages back, insignificant number of pages. But I was kind of amused because the end of the report says that consider Gunderson armed and dangerous. They should have added with knowledge. Okay. I knew they were going to indict me on a Tuesday. Thursday and Friday before that, I took 3 polygraph exams because I knew what their target was and what they were after. I gave it to my attorney, Doug Mulder in Dallas. I said, Doug, give this to the foreman of the grand jury. I passed the 3 polygraphs. He did. I was able to put a stop to it. The U.S. attorney who was going to indict me was a fellow named Bill Alexander. That didn't work. Next, in 82 and 83, now, bear in mind, I got out in 79, broke the case, the McDonald case in 1980. In 82 and 83, I had 3 occasions when gunmen were waiting for me. There were 3 contracts on me, 3 different contracts. And I was fortunate because the one night, one of them, I haven't got time to go into each of the instances, but I can tell you about one of them. My landlady, this one particular night I didn't go home. And my landlady, where I lived, left a note on my car the next night when I came home. You need to see me. She had come home the night I didn't go home. 1:30 in the morning, 2 men were sitting across from my front door in a car. One got out, walked over to, you know where Ted Gunderson lives? She said, no, I didn't know. I always told her if anybody asked Mom, she didn't know. She went upstairs and waited until, watched, and then at 1:45, the 2 men drove off. Well, she told me that. I started making phone calls to my sources, and I found out I not only had 1 hit on me, I had 2 hits on me, 2 contracts out on me. I got out of Dodge right away. I left, and I went underground for 18 months. I was able to get 1 hit off of me right away. It took me 18 months to get the other hit off. I haven't got time to go into detail about how I did it. The 1 hit, I found out who one of the persons was, one of the leading gangsters in Los Angeles was, and I got 3 of my friends, and we knocked on the door and went in, and I talked to him, and I said, hey, I got a hit on me. Would you take it off? And he couldn't believe I was there. And anyway, he sent me into a room, and there were all 4 of us. The other 3, 2 of them were ex-cons. You know, in my business, you can be with the president of a bank one day and you can be with a drug dealer the next, right? So you never know. You have to be able to get along with all these people. So we went into this side room, and a little dog came in, smelled all 4 of us, and sat down at my feet, went to sleep. And this fellow came in, I call him the cocaine king of the West Coast. He looked around, he saw the dog, he says, my dog likes you. I like you. Now, you talk about divine intervention. God put that dog in that room at my feet. Long story short, I talked to him. He excused the other 3 fellows, and he says, I was working on an attempted assassination privately. He pulled out an artist's conception of an individual who was the driver of the car in the attempted assassination case, and he said, where'd this come from? Because I was the one that investigated and got the artist's conception and so forth. Just, investigative, routine type stuff. And I said to him, if I tell you who gave that to me and you're going to do something to him, I won't tell you. I'm going to take the heat. I'll take the heat. He got a little upset about that, and he says, no, I didn't say I was going to do anything to him. And I said, okay. So I finally told him the story, and he left and he came back. He says, "You're right, you got a hit on you. I've taken one off, but I can't take the other one off of you." So fortunately that I did go that day, because I was able to then leave town. I had 8 people working in my office. Tried to keep the office going. Had a very competent office manager, but if you're not there, you don't have hands-on, those of you who are businessmen, you can't make it in business. You've got to have hands-on. You've got to handle the finance. You've got to handle everything. You've got to oversee everything. So I went to Dallas for 6 months, and then F. Lee Bailey put me to work on the road, and I lost my business. Ran up my rent to $100,000. Couldn't pay the landlord, and so forth. But those were the hits and the contracts that were put on me. Then that didn't work. The FBI and the DEA put a girl on me, tried to set me up on a drug deal. Her name was Pam Fawcett. I dealt with her for 6 months. She was in Modesto, right down the road here. Called me one day. She says, "I want to talk to you." She drove down to L.A. We'd been talking on the phone. And she told me the story, how the FBI and DEA tried to set me up on a drug deal. She was the intermediary. And I said to Pam, "Pam," I took a statement from her, gave her a polygraph and all that. I said to Pam, "Why did you come over to my side?" The FBI had given her $2,000. They gave her a run of the office. She had her own coffee cup. She could come and go as she pleased. And Pam says to me, she says, and I'd been giving her a little advice on the phone about a 14-year-old son who was in trouble in Florida. I said, "Pam, why'd you come to me? You're working with the DEA and the FBI. Why'd you come to me?" She says, "I woke up the other morning, and I realized you're the only honest son of a bitch I've talked to in 6 months." Those were exact words. And I said, "Thank you very much, Pam." I took a signed statement, sent it copy to Washington, D.C., to Buck Revell, who was number 2 or 3 man in the FBI, and he worked for me, a bank robbery supervisor in Philadelphia, when I was number 2 man in Philadelphia. And I told Buck, I said, first the Dallas caper, where they tried to investigate me and put me in jail and all that sort of thing. I said, first the Dallas caper, and now this, with my signed statement from Pam. And I said, "Buck, you guys," meaning the FBI, "are Bush. Now, you ladies know what Bush means? The men know what Bush means. Bush is Bush League, minor leagues." So, that didn't work. The next thing that happened to me, now this is part of the conspiracy, okay? I'm telling you, okay? I dared to challenge them, and they sent an army after me. The next thing that happened to me is a guy named Stu Webb starts putting disinformation out on the internet about me. He has absolutely, thanks to why Norm, thanks a lot, has absolutely no credibility. He put out word that I was practicing satanic ceremonies in the federal building, and that's the reason I was kicked out of the FBI. And the truth is, I had a retirement party. I had 600 people in my party. I had the governor, Jerry Brown, the former governor, Pat Brown. I had head of the highway patrol, the sheriff, the chief of police. I had the Mayor Bradley there. But this guy Webb puts this disinformation out about me. And in spite of the fact the guy has no credibility, and I have credibility, some of the people actually believed him. I'm not some guy pushing a grocery cart around looking for a recycling center, right? I have background. I have the credentials to stand up here and tell you what's going on. Well, that worked to a degree, because a number of my lectures were discontinued. People quit asking me to come out and talk to them, except for the Granada Forum in L.A. Wendy would have me out there regularly. Thanks, Wendy. Wendy doesn't believe it, do you, Wendy? The next thing, I'm living in Las Vegas. I'd been in L.A. and moved from L.A. to Las Vegas in 1994. And I have a situation where I took a girl off the streets in L.A. She was the former girlfriend of an al-Qaeda leader of a terrorist cell in L.A. Her name was Fiona Lyon. She wandered in the streets. She started asking too many questions of this terrorist group in L.A. And this was a year ago last August, or 2 years ago last August. And I had a call from a preacher, and he says, "I have this problem. I don't know what to do with this girl." I interviewed her for 4 hours. By the way, that DVD is available to you on the 400 plus DVDs that are free. Okay, free, get them. Make copies, get them out. It's my job. I've been called upon by the good Lord to get as much information out as possible about what's going on under the scenes, behind the scenes. So I take this girl, do the interview with her, and so on and so forth. I tried to place her. I wrote to the FBI. I gave them the report. When I reported on her, she identified the locations of the 8 locations where the terrorists were meeting. 8 locations. I gave it to the FBI. I told them we need to put her in the witness protection program. I'm still waiting to hear from them. This was a year and a half ago. And they did interview her arrest her boyfriend and another individual and deport them because they were here illegally from the Philippines. But I'm telling you, I have never seen convergence like that on me, even though I've been a victim of disinformation and surveillance and everything. Once I took that girl in, they came out of every nook and cranny. I can't believe how many surveillances they had on me. And they were not discreet at all. They were very obvious. Driving from one of my associates, Clarence Malcolm, there was an attempt to kidnap him. I went over. That's another long story, and I won't go into it, but I went over and basically rescued him and told Clarence, who'd written a book about how to take our country back, I told Clarence, Clarence, you better come on over and live with me. So he came over and lived with me. This was before the Fiona Lyon case. So this is just typical of what's happening. And Clarence is with me today. He does a great job. He made that board back there, and he put these reports together, these DVDs. Clarence is the one that's responsible for that, not me. You just work together. And so anyway, we had this girl, and I tried to place her. Finally, couldn't place her any place. Took her to New York, and she thought she had a friend there that could help her. And then I took her to Oregon, and nobody there would help her. I had no other choice but to bring her in. I had a 3-bedroom condo in Las Vegas. And she ended up finding a man there and getting married and so forth. And she came in one night, about 11:30. She and her husband came in. And by the way, the whole time, from the time I took her in up until right today, we've had unbelievable number of surveillances on us. So she and her husband came home one night about 11:30, walked in and said, "You look sick. You're terrible." And I looked so bad that they called paramedics. Paramedic came, had blood temperature, blood pressure, 242 over 119. And the paramedic said, "You go to the hospital." I went to the hospital and so on and so forth. I realized then that there was something unusual happening to me, and I came back. And I had tests taken because I would sit at my desk and I couldn't think. I couldn't remember who I talked to on the phone last. So I took tests, and I found I had arsenic and cyanide in me. And I have those tests available, by the way. And I put it together. You know, a lot of our patriot people are dying from heart attacks and strokes. I think what it is, I can't prove it, it's this poison gas that they're pumped into my condo, and that's what they wanted to happen to me. They wanted me to die of natural causes. As a matter of fact, Clarence was driving from Las Vegas to L.A. once, and a car pulls in front of him, a car pulls behind him, a car pulls behind him, front next to behind him. And he's trapped, and blue smoke comes out of the car in front of him. And he was sick for 2 weeks. He's still sick, by the way. I was taking the same route about 2 months later, and the same thing happened to me, car in front, car next, and there was no car behind me, fortunately. And I suspected it because I was doing 75. This car was following me. He got up and got in front of me, slowed down to 55 miles an hour. I had to slow down because I was blocked, and I backed off right away. And then I went down about another 50 miles, pulled into a gas station. He was waiting down there for me. They gassed him. I was being gassed. There's no question about it. The New World Order boy, I call them the junior high boys. They're recruited out of Special Forces, by the way. McVeigh was recruited out of Special Forces. You say McVeigh was flunked out of Special Forces? He didn't flunk out of Special Forces. He was recruited. He wrote a letter to his sister and said that he had been recruited to work for the CIA on the assassination squad and on the CIA drug operation. So anyway, I'm driving down. I suspect, because of what happened to Clarence, he told me. Car pulled right in front of me, 55. I backed off real fast, pulled over to the side of the road, waited 15 minutes. They're waiting for me 50 miles down the road. That's the latest thing with me, poison. I was poisoned. And I said to myself, you know, I got to get out of Dodge. I'm in Las Vegas. I got to leave Las Vegas. And within 2 weeks, I had my friend John DeCamp, attorney in Nebraska. He and I worked the Franklin cover-up case together. John called me. I called John. I said, John, I got to get out of here. He said, well, come on back. I got a place. I can put you up. So he's renting a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home to me in Claytonia, Nebraska. Claytonia, Nebraska. How many people know, have heard of Claytonia, Nebraska? I'm not going to see any hands out there, I'm sure of that. 296 people. And John's renting that place to me for $550 a month. I can barely afford it, believe me. But it's interesting because whereas in Las Vegas, and not particularly LA, but Las Vegas particularly, we had this girl, this Fiona Lyon, all these surveillances on me and all this gassing and all that other thing. Now I'm living in a single house dwelling, and these people, these junior high boys, come poking around there, but we can spot them in the small town. In fact, we've run them out of town several times. And it's kind of interesting because the main street's 5 blocks long, and all the side streets end up dead ending into cornfields. And one of the guys came in there, poking around, driving through the city. We figured out who it was. He had out of another town license plate from another town down the road. So Malcolm got behind him and chased him, and the guy went up a side street and ended up in a cornfield, right? Had to do a U-turn and come back down. So Las Vegas, I left there. I'm in Claytonia, Nebraska, 296 people, and it's beautiful. Now, why me, right? Why am I targeted? Well, just in addition to these cases I mentioned earlier, I'm in a unique position of not only being involved in research, but also I've been on the streets. I get my hands dirty. I've been down in the trenches. I worked the Franklin cover-up case with John DeCamp. How many have heard of the Franklin cover-up case? This case here, here's a book. This is a must-read book, okay? This is a book about the Franklin cover-up. John wrote this book. He has sold 181,000 copies of this book on his own. None of the bookstores would handle it. They won't handle it anymore. They all say it's out of print. This is a case where John called me. He actually didn't call me, but I went back there at the request of another individual, Lincoln, Nebraska citizen, Ed Weaver, who owned the potato chip factory. He read about me in a book called The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry. Come back here, we got a problem. Long story short, this involved an illegal government drug operation, satanic cults. They were taking children out of Boys Town, orphanages, foster homes in Omaha, driving them to Sioux City, Iowa, 184 miles away, placing them in private jets and flying to Washington, D.C. for sex orgies with congressmen and senators. What better way to get a congressman and a senator and tell them how to vote? I personally talked to the photographer of the group, Rusty Nelson, and what Rusty did, he was ordered to take pictures of the congressmen and senators in order to blackmail them. That's what's happening in Washington today, by the way, with a number of them. And then what Rusty did, he put his own film in every once in a while because he realized that there was a problem. It would be a problem down the road. And so he had these pictures. And one time, again, I can't go into a lot of detail, I don't have time, but I told Rusty, I said, let's go find them. He hid these pictures in the mountains in Colorado. And one time, Pat Shannon and I went out in the mountains to look for the pictures. We didn't find any. We had several interesting experiences there. This is a Franklin cover-up case. This involved satanic cults, involved kidnapping children, led me to an organization in Washington, D.C. known as the Finders. The Finders is a CIA covert operation that's been operating since the early 1960s. And when they were exposed in 1987, because of some of the work that I did and some other individuals did, I have a report which is listed in here called The Finders. The documents that this Finders organization was a CIA covert operation. The report is from the U.S. Department of the Treasury. And I checked in, did some more checking there, and I find out now the latest information. By the way, you've heard of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, right? That's an adjunct of the U.S. Department of Justice. And it's kind of interesting because the Department of Justice has been operating this organization for more than 25 years. And I learned that, and they have this listed on their website, that 91 persons disappear every hour in America. It is estimated between 85 and 90%. I have 5 minutes. 85 and 90% of those who disappeared are children. I charted this cards that they sent out. They sent them out by the thousands, I guess probably by the millions. And I found out that during the months of June, October, and December, of all the children that I checked in the cards, half of them disappeared during those 3 months. The other 9 disappeared in the other months. If you would check the satanic calendar, this covert operation, it's satanic, it's Illuminati. Okay, we're in a spiritual war. If you check the calendar, the satanic holidays, you'll see that the big holidays are the summer solstice, June 21st, Halloween, October 31st, and the winter solstice. In the back of this pamphlet, I have the list of the satanic holidays. I also have a collage of some of the world's leaders who have pictures of them given the internationally recognized satanic sign, the satanic sign, the hook 'em horns sign, okay? This is among my research. How much time do I have? 3 minutes? Wow. Well, I'm going to have to skip through some things here. I have a lot more information for you. What's the bottom line? Bottom line is this. It's called The Illuminati. This is the best book of its kind that's ever been written, called Pawns in the Game. In 1776, May the 1st, Adam Weishaupt, a Jesuit priest, announced the 25 goals to take over the world 230-some years ago. These included elect our own people to office, control the media. In my research, I have a copy of the congressional record, February 9th, 1917, where Congressman Callaway stood on the congressional floor and announced that the J.P. Morgan interests had bought up 25 of America's leading newspapers in order to control the press. They control them today. Another one of the goals is corrupt the youth through sex and drugs. That's happening. We're talking about passing out condoms to 10, 11, 12-year-old children on the East Coast someplace. Elect our own people to office, I mentioned. Infiltrate law enforcement. Infiltrate the military. It's all here in this book. This explains what's going on. It's satanic cult. It's evil. We're being run, this country's being run by Satanists, in my opinion. And I can go on and on. Actually, I have about a 4 or 5 hour lecture, but I've had to cut it down a little bit. But what's happening? Well, we have internment camps. Okay, this is a picture of the railroad cars that they're going to haul us up and carry us off the internment camps in. There's shackles in these cars. It's 3-level. I saw this. I was driving here not too long ago from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. And as a Barstow, and there's a railroad overpass there. And it was at night, 9:30, and I went down, and then I started to go down and looked up. My headlights hit on one of these cars right here. These are manufactured by a company in Portland, Oregon, known as the Portland Gunderson Railroad Company or something. I don't know. No relative, I hope. No relation. Anyway, folks, I'm going to have to run. I condensed as much as I could into telling you about this. One of the problems we have, which I'd like to mention, we need to elect Ron Paul. One of the problems we have in electing him is there are electronic voting machines out there. They can manipulate